All right. Well, former President Trump is turning himself in to Fulton County, Georgia authorities. That's today. Trump writing on Truth Social yesterday, quote, "I will proudly be arrested tomorrow afternoon in Georgia." He's expected to get a mugshot. 9 other co-defendants already surrendering to Fulton County, including Rudy Giuliani. Joining me now is former Trump White House associate counsel May Mailman. May, good morning. Walk us through what you're expecting today from the former president.
Yeah, so the Fulton County Jail does not have a great history of good process. It usually takes hours for defendants to get through. But this is because it's the former president. He's got Secret Service. This should be a pretty quick and mundane process. I think one major difference from the federal courts that we've seen is that this is different than an arraignment. So he's not going to be in the courtroom pleading guilty or not guilty. This is going to be, I guess, mugshots and fingerprints, although, a mugshot seems entirely unnecessary. And the actual arraignment will be in early September, where there will be cameras in the courtroom.
Oh, well, that's going to be interesting. Todd Pyro's on set with me. He's got a question for you, May.
May, I want to ask you about the Mark Meadows defense, immunity to state charges given status as a federal official. Why aren't we hearing more about this defense? And as a lawyer, knowing the landscape of appeals and how the courts operate, Democrat, Republican, where do you think that argument goes on appeal if inevitably it's shot down at lower court levels? Because to me, these were all, by and large, federal officials, and they're being prosecuted in a state court. Seems pretty obvious to me.
Yeah, I would say that Mark Meadows and then the DOJ official Jeff Clark have the best argument to say that what they were doing in their official role, because they didn't have roles with the campaign. They weren't, Mark Meadows isn't chief of staff to the Trump campaign. He was chief of staff to Trump, the president. And so those officials are going to have very good arguments. And where they're making those arguments, I think you've got some pretty good courts in the lower courts, and then you've got I think they've got a good chance for appeal, and you do want to, I think, be in federal court. The jury pool is going to be larger. It's going to be a judge that is appointed and isn't politically voted on. So being in federal court is definitely going to be beneficial for those defendants, and I think they have a good argument. Trump has a little bit tougher of an argument because Trump is a candidate, and that status as a candidate is different than your status as the president of the United States. That said, some of the conversations that he was having as president of the United States and not as a candidate. So that we haven't seen what Trump's argument is yet. He hasn't made that filing. That filing is going to be a little bit more complicated than Mark Meadows or than a Jeff Clark, but I still think it's a viable argument. It's one he should make because you do want to be in a more neutral spot, which is going to be federal court.
Well, May, he's one candidate, but there were 8 on the stage last night. The first 2024 GOP presidential debate took place. The candidates were all asked about supporting former President Trump if he's the nominee. Listen.
You all signed a pledge to support the eventual Republican nominee. If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice?
Okay, so basically everybody except for Asa Hutchinson's raised their hand. Chris Christie, we're still kind of debating this morning whether or not that was a yes or a no, May, but your initial reaction to that?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing people talk about is that Vivek was the one who was most enthusiastic to raise his hand, but that's Vivek's entire campaign strategy, is he's trying to be the biggest Trump guy, which I think shows that he's the least Trump guy because he thinks that actually Trump is going to somehow fall in his face and that Vivek is going to then take all those voters. So, yeah, I would say that it's wise and it's good to say that you are going to support the Republican candidate candidate, even if they end up facing and being convicted by a jury in Washington, D.C., which is more than 90% of Biden supporters, or a jury in Fulton County by a prosecutor who is elected by Democrats and fundraising from Democrats. So absolutely the right decision to raise your hand. Why is Asa Hutchinson on the stage? I have almost no idea.
I was going to say, well, Asa Hutchinson, to be clear, I mean, he was on one side on the end, and then Doug Burgum was on the other because of the polling issues. There are a lot of calls made, to be clear here, about that Asa Hutchinson at this point, and maybe Doug Burgum as well, should step aside. But real quick, your final thoughts about the debate last night, just in general. Did you see a breakout moment when you were watching it all?
So, breakout moments are tough. I think with debates, I get more annoyed than I think, wow, this is my person. And so I thought that actually the little skirmishes between Pence and Vivek were, I was actually surprised that Pence was really trying to talk over the moderators and get in as many fights as he ended up doing. So I think that those two, that dynamic actually didn't go so well. I think that Ron DeSantis actually met or even exceeded expectations, and those expectations were sky high. So for me, and I think people say he dodged some questions. Yeah, he answered the question that he wanted to, which is, I have a record in Florida. Look what I have done. I'm not just words. I've actually done stuff. And so to answer that question, to point to his record, is not dodging the question. It is showing what he would do as a president. And I thought that he did a better job than expected, and therefore he, I would say, won the debate.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, May Mailman, it's always great to hear people's initial thoughts the morning after. Great to have you here this morning, May. Come back anytime. Love having you here.
Yeah, thanks.